So why are constitutions important? Now, the reality is, just looking at the region, the challenges that the regions have faced over time, and I dare say Kenya is no different, because the history, what it's reminding us or stealing us, is the post-election violence that we had in Kenya. And the reality is, hence we needed a constitution that would be able to separate the three arms of government, ensuring that they can be checks and balances as much as they can work together, but each arm of government can independently be able to undertake its role without undue influence from one arm of government. And so when you talk about the constitutional order, I think it's really helped our country and our nation, because except the impasse that we had in the transition that led us to having, I would say, I'm not going to call it the broad-based government, I'm going to say the coalition government that we had during Kibaki and then the Prime Minister Raila Odinga, there was a constitution clearly defining how things should be run. And what happened is we had an independent electoral body, but the numbers weren't adding up based on what had happened in the elections. And so, irrespective of the fact that a transition was done, order was taken, but because of the mood of the country, and also that element of the people of Kenya recognizing that there was a constitution that clearly defined how things ought to have been done, and there was a failure to do so, there was disarray in the country because people also rejected a government that did not follow or did not come into power in accordance to the constitution. And so constitutions are quite important because it helps define the term of a president, which is quite crucial. Look at world over, even let's say the US, as good as people may have loved Clinton, may have loved Obama, the constitution was clear. They could only serve 2 terms, and they had to leave thereafter. The challenge is, how can we set a constitution, even in this country, that cannot be easily manipulated or changed without the consent of the people of Uganda? When you look at the proposals that have been there over time, even before our elections, there was an attempt to change the constitution, which the people were against, and even the independent courts were able to hold to that regard, because the courts as well are an independent arm of government, but at the same time, there's that feel from what the people of Kenya in terms of public participation. And so the question is, in your country, have you been able to develop and protect the 3 arms of government? That parliament is independent, though I would say tongue-in-cheek, it's a challenge we're having in our own country in terms of independence of parliament. But the judiciary is also independent, or seemingly at least has legs to be able to stand against the executive. That the judiciary can say no to the executive, can stop unconstitutional laws, can stop attempts to change the constitution without following due process. So that you make it difficult, once you have a good constitution, make it difficult to change without the will of the people. That it has to come back to the people, there has to be a referendum, the voice of the people must be heard, and then do we have independent institutions, especially the electoral body, that can make an independent decision from the decision of the executive. And Kenya can be an example that you can look into, because the transition in the last election wasn't the most cordial. However, it had to be done because the independent electoral body made its decision, and it's very clear in the constitution what happens next. And so transfer of power had to happen, irrespective of personal views or the position that was held by the former head of state. And that's the kind of constitution that we need to develop in our countries, that bring back power to the people. so that irrespective of there being an executive, the executive can remember that this is a social contract. And in this social contract, you have donated certain powers to them for a given period of time to serve you. And when they fail, the people have the power to recall their members of parliament. They have the power to change the executive through their ballot. And of course, by having an independent electoral body.
Faith, you've covered a lot of ground. And let me bring in Dr. Kabumba here, who has been, he's also a columnist. He writes for the Observer Weekly. And his last couple of about the Constitution as an illusion. I remember, ladies and gentlemen, about 14 years ago now, I was an Open Society Fellow, and I gave a lecture where I was arguing that what Uganda needs is a constitutional crisis, something that is so grave it forces us to restructure root and branch, how we want to be governed, deal with things like the role of the military in the state, the size of the government, etc., etc., and Dr. Kabumba was a panelist. Even then, he was very skeptical that something like that could happen. But Kabumba, you referred to the Constitution as an illusion. First.
Thank you, Angelo. It's a pleasure to be here. I'd like to thank Chapter 4, Nicholas, Tony, Claire, and other colleagues. Chapter 4 has been particularly supportive to Hiripek. I was joking with Nicholas today that when Chapter 4 asks Hiripek to jump, we only ask how high, so it's a real pleasure to be here. Now, to your question, Angelo, you mentioned the Observer column, and today I wrote a piece that reflects on the life of and legacy and work of Oloko Nyango, Professor Oloko Nyango. And I noticed as I was writing it that in my interaction with him, I've told quite a number of lies. As an intern, when I wanted a recommendation letter from him, I lied that I was acting with his class. He caught me in that lie. Later on, I lied that I hadn't given out his book to some dissertation supervisee. He caught me again in that one. And this morning, as I was reflecting, I was asking myself, maybe I should have edited out those parts of the story to perhaps not make it so obvious that so many times in my life I've told lies. But the more I thought about it, the more it came to me that lies seem to be a very critical feature of the human experience. Think about the number of lies that I've been told this morning, for instance. Great to meet you. Looking forward to this panel. I've run out of business cards, but I really wanted to give you one. I'll keep in touch. Lies seem to be the glue that holds society together. They're very necessary lies. They hold marriages together. I love you very much is a lie often told. That gentleman, I've never heard of him in my life. I've never cheated on, I will never cheat on you. Lies seem really to be part of who we are as human beings. In some cases, lies can even be very kind. Maybe the Constitution, I actually think the Constitution tells a lot of lies. For many reasons. From Article 1, all power belongs to the people. The Ugandans know in this Uganda, that's not quite the truth. I don't have to belabor the point. Article 2, the Constitution is the supreme law. We know the supreme law. The idea that there's an independent judiciary in Uganda, we know. The idea that there's even a parliament, we know. The idea that there's even an executive, the idea that there's a budgeting process, that there's a Bank of Uganda with a governor that is independent, a central bank that's independent. Political parties also tell these lies, opposition political parties. One Uganda, one people. Very many Ugandans, very many people, very many countries within this very small country. So why does the Constitution tell lies? Maybe for the same reasons that we tell lies to each other. To keep the peace, to keep hope alive, to postpone the war for another 10, 20, 30 years. I don't know. But it's clear, at least I suspect to many of us in this room, that our Constitution does tell very many lies. From the very first article to very fundamental things it says, to certain fundamental assumptions it makes about popular justice, about democracy, about sovereignty. in very many ways, in very many instances, it is a book of lies. Now, but of course, the truth is a bit darker. Article 22, the right to life. The idea that in Uganda, everyone has no life shall be taken intentionally except convicted of a serious crime, confirmed by the highest appellate court. That's what we claim in Article 22. The truth again, just go to any, even just outside this conference, maybe even in this conference hall, I don't know. Steal a phone, steal something, maybe worth 20,000 shillings. You will die. You will be lynched in about 5 minutes to 10 minutes. So we tell lies to ourselves. We tell lies about who we are as a people, what our values are, etc. It's not just lies told by at the national level. There are also fundamental lies told at the societal level. So, I don't know. So, is there hope? Just 1 minute.
I actually wanted to draw you to something your students might say.
Yes.
That the Constitution, well, you could call it a book of lies, but isn't there a distinction between the Constitution and constitutionalism, which is the praxis?
Yes, but you see, one presupposes the other. And the absence of one may also explain the absence of the other. So constitutionalism is the practice of living up to the constitution that you made for yourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And constitutionalism, in a sense, also presupposes that you made the constitution for yourselves. So if one is a lie, the other perhaps cannot work, and maybe the absence of this explains the absence of the other. So again, the story told in Benjamin Odoki's book, The Search for a National Consensus, is a story about former Chief Justice of Uganda. It's a story about a proper, genuine search for a national compact. The truth, of course, is less romantic. It's the truth of an unimposed constitution during the NRM era with predetermined outcomes. The CA elections, for instance, one day you can't campaign on political party activities. All of you must campaign in one forum. The CA itself, the Constitutional Commission itself, composed completely of NRM people. So the entire story itself, even of the constitution-making process, is a story of lies. Now, so the document that comes out, even from the preamble, we the people of Uganda, that itself was a lie. Recalling our history is a lie because it was not the people of Uganda making it. It was, in a sense, as Olive Kopsinja said, it was controlled consent. It was Noam Chomsky, it was manufactured. It was even worse than manufactured consent. It was forced, it was coercion. The correct line had to be followed. So in those circumstances, it's not surprising that you have a document that tells lies. The process was problematic. It's the fruit of a poisonous tree. So in that perspective, in a sense, actually, constitutionalism cannot happen, and perhaps constitutionalism is itself to be deceptive. And that's why you have work like that of Mark Tashnet and others that talks about abusive constitutionalism. The idea that, so at times, you can even be abused by having a constitution that is really designed to keep you in check. Elections. So it has come to a point where we fear elections. Because I think November, 1 year since so many people were. So in other words, I see when the moderator touches his microphone, you know what's coming. In other words, perhaps we have to start from those fundamental questions as to what is this document? Does it tell the truth? And so the question as to whether there's hope, certainly. I see Andrew here, Andrew Karamaji and other troublemakers in this room. The hope, praise Aloikin and your colleague Seperia, the hope is in those people who are willing to stare this lie in the face, to stare decorum in the face. The hope is in that gentleman who is not very popular in this room, Isaac Semakade. The hope is in those people who have the guts. Of course, they may say certain bad words here and there, and that's terrible. We condemn it. But those who are condemning it with very nice statements are quiet about Justice Kisache, are quiet about everyday substantial violations. So the hope, I think, the hope really is in those Ugandans who are willing to remove the ties and the coats, as the case may be, maybe even all their clothes when the occasion demands it, and speak truth to power in its ugliness. Thank you.
Thank you. and they say the truth will set you free.